Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome to Alviso. And welcome to our public meeting about the Calabazas San Tomas Aquino Creek-Marsh Connection Project. I'd also like to welcome those joining us over Zoom, which allows this meeting to be recorded for anyone who couldn't participate in person tonight or who really wants to watch it over and over again. It'll be on our Valley Water webpage on our YouTube channel. For those on Zoom who would like to ask a question, we would like to make sure you use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen instead of the chat function. That allows us to be able to respond to them as a part of our presentation. There'll be two different presentations tonight, one on the project's background and an overview. It's an overview, and the other on the project's conceptual alternatives. Following the presentations at about 6:30, there will be a Q&A period where before the meeting adjourns at about 7. The library closes at 7, so we have an end goal, but we're happy to answer questions up until then. The purpose of tonight's meeting is for community members to understand this project's definition, key project issues, restoration concepts, and the conceptual alternative development process, and to give you a chance to provide feedback on public preferences regarding restoration priorities and the conceptual alternatives. I ask that we follow the meeting ground rules to have a productive and respectful meeting. We'll honor the agenda and participate actively and respectfully and work to understand each other's perspectives on this. A few housekeeping items. There are restrooms just across the hall, and we have some coffee and cookies and snacks. Please help yourself to those at any time. We also have at the check-in table some valuable water conservation information and giveaways to help your family make conservation a way of life. Even with all this rain, we still need to find ways to conserve. And after this meeting, we ask that you take a moment to complete a survey. It takes a second. It's a page and a half, and it really helps us with our planning and to make sure that these meetings accomplish their objectives. Now I'd like to introduce Director Richard Santos, a member of the Valley Water Board of Directors. He represents the area where this project is located. And is a native of Alviso. He was first elected in 2000 to serve on this board and to represent District 3, which includes the cities of Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, Alviso, Milpitas, Berryessa, Alum Rock areas of San Jose. He has volunteered as a member in this community for just about every big project that's happened, including was chairman of the Alviso Library Project Fundraising Committee and served our community as a firefighter for many years. Director Santos, the floor is yours.
Good evening to you all. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah. Anyway, I'm Richard Santos, your director. Hi, Charles. Haven't seen you in a while. There's a few people I haven't seen. My family's been here about 110 years. My dad was the first one born here, so it's always nice to be in the community and see good things happen to everybody, but especially Alviso. Anyway, today our staff are here. They're all over the place. We got to give them a round of applause because we had budget today and we all worked since about 7:30. So thank you, staff, to do all this work. Thank you. They asked me to do the first things. We always got to talk and introduce. We have our government officials. I understand in the virtual, we have Ro Khanna, our congressperson, and representing him is Olivia Rodriguez. So Olivia, if you're there, welcome. Tell Ro we said hi. I was with him about 2 weeks ago, so it's really nice. Then our state senator, Aisha Wahab, correct? I did okay. Martha Krieger. Martha, if you're there, thank you for representing all of us. That's our district. So is Ro Khanna. So anyway, here's the project. I won't go on and on. I don't know that much about it. I'm here to learn myself. And of course, anytime you're going to save the environment and have flood protection and water flowing and making sure the habitat is taken care of and all those good things, I'm all for it. Especially in Alviso with Roy Hayes and the Yacht Club. We've been together since like 1898 or something, and it goes on and on. Alviso was a city back in 1852. So, but y'all don't know, I used to chase jackrabbits right here. This was cow pastures when I was a kid. I lived in a little tiny house over here. When those days, the school was over here. It was built in 1900, and all of us went to the same school. It was a different time, different era. Then the 5th grade, I started over here. I think it was a couple of wings back then. That's when they had capital punishment when you went to school. It was a different ball game. And we all worked in the fields. Everybody worked. So it was a different ball game, but I'm really happy to be here. And again, for the environment, including Alviso, with this, it complements the shoreline study which is about a $500 million project. And Mike and all our staff, everybody's worked on that, especially Rocana. It'll save us some title funding, and Charles Taylor, who's back there with the used to be Alviso Community Group, him and I went back, we've been about 13 years doing all that kind of stuff, and it's paying off today. So if you wait long enough, things happen, but we hope we can make it faster. So without that, let me see, we're gonna have Mike Potter come back, and thank you all for coming and sharing your interest.
Thank you, Director Santos, for your service to this community and to our water district. Tonight's presentation will be started by Valley Water's John Bourgeois, who is the Deputy Operating Officer. John, take it away.
Director Santos always takes pleasure in saying my last name. So, hey. Yes, sir. Thank you. And a huge round of applause for Director Santos. He has been a huge supporter of not only this community, but restoration in the Bay. He's really helped make this happen. Like the director said, before I was with Valley Water, I was also the executive project manager of the South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project. And I'm really excited to be here tonight for a variety of reasons, but in particular, this project is near and dear to my heart. We conceived of it over a decade ago. So it's really nice to see progress being made. Maybe not as fast as we want, but it's happening. And for those of you that don't know, so Calabazas and San Tomas Aquino Creeks drain from south to north toward San Francisco Bay. When they get to San Francisco Bay, they take a hard left. They make these weird, unnatural 90-degree turns. The reason they do that is because they were avoiding the salt ponds, right? They were property of Cargill, so they had to avoid the product of the salt making company. Well, those ponds are now in public ownership. There is no reason for these creeks to be diverted in that way anymore. And in fact, as a Bay community in 2013 through 2015, the scientific community got together and we looked at the Baylands ecosystem goals through the context of climate change, right? Kind of reevaluate what we wanted to accomplish. And reconnecting creeks to the Bay came out as one of the best things that we can do for a resilient shoreline. And this is the prime example in San Francisco Bay of where that can happen. There aren't many locations where we can actually achieve that sort of restoration, and this is one of them. But the devil's in the details, right? So there's, we've got a built environment around us, and there's a lot to consider, right? We've got people using trails, we've got highways, we've got habitat, we've got, all kinds of things that we need to consider. So we're going to go over some of that detail with you here tonight, hopefully get your input. This process actually started a number of years ago. We started with a visioning process, and Scott here from SFEI was heavily involved running that program for us. We brought in a panel of outside experts to kind of vet this idea to make sure, it seems obvious, but let's talk through the details. So we got some outside experts to come in and come up with a vision for this area. And so this is us trying to execute that vision. But we can't do it alone. This is not just a Valley Water project, right? We have very key partners. And can I get you to go to the next slide? I don't know who's driving. There we go. I'm not going to name all of them, but I would really like to highlight our funders. We've got about $8 million in grant funding for this. That tells you like how important this type of project is. So I'd like to thank the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. You may remember voting for Measure AA a number of years ago. They're helping to fund this. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife, as well as the US EPA, their Water Quality Improvement Fund. We've got grants from all of these folks to try and make this project happen. I also want to greatly thank our project partners. This is not just a Valley Water project. We are proud to be partners with the South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project on a larger effort, and this is a component of that larger effort, right? And it is a joint project between us. And also the landowners, right? The property that these creeks will drain into eventually is owned by the Don Edwards San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge. So we're very grateful for our wildlife refuge partners. We've also got partners like Caltrans, who own the Highway 237 Marsh. We've got all our adjacent and participating municipalities, Sunnyvale, thank you, Melanie, Santa Clara, San Jose, right? We've got all of these partners. So it really does take a village to get a project like this done. And one more slide. Again, I'm not going to go through all the names, but we've got a huge team working on this. We've got a consultant team led by Noah, who you'll hear from shortly, as well as our project manager, Judy Nam at Valley Water. So I want to thank her for she's put in a lot of effort, and she was instrumental in getting that grant money for us. So big thanks to Judy. So So thank you for indulging me a little bit in the history to get us to this point, but I am going to turn it over now to my friend and colleague, the current executive project manager of the South Bay Salt Pond Project, Mr. Dave Halsing.
Well, thanks. How do you follow those two guys? Really? I mean, thanks. My name is Dave Halsing, and it is an honor to be here to follow John in this meeting as I am in my current job. Thanks to Director Santos and Valley Water and all of you for being here. It's great to see you here. So much of what I was going to say, John already covered, so I am not going to repeat it. I am instead just going to point out that the South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project has been going on for 20 years. These ponds were acquired 20 years ago. And during that entire time, through a series of different phases in different places around the bay, there has been very careful planning and design, permitting and construction to do tidal marsh restoration and to improve flood management capacity and to add public access and recreation features, trails, viewing areas, things like that. One of the places where that is going on is what we're talking about tonight. This purple area down here at the bottom, the A8 ponds. You're going to be hearing a lot about them in phase one of the restoration project. Those ponds were very limited connections were made to the surrounding waterways to introduce water and understand what would happen with mercury and water quality in that area. In phase two of the project, 200,000 cubic yards of dirt have been brought in and are stockpiled and ready to be graded out into habitat features that you're going to hear more about this evening. We're going to be doing that work later this year. And as part of thinking about the future phase of the project, going back a decade ago, like John said, we started thinking about what that might look like and how best to achieve that. And it became clear several years ago that one of the best ways to do that would be to work with Valley Water on not only doing full tidal marsh restoration of these group of ponds, but to also connect these creeks through the southern end of it. That makes the aquatic habitat connectivity better. It increases long-term sediment supply to the ponds and eventually to the marsh that will form there. And it provides a number of different other benefits in terms of long-term flood management opportunities and public access. So we are a full-throated and just enthusiastic partner in this project, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to sort of be part of the kickoff for this. So I think with that, I'm handing it over to Noah. I'll be here for the Q&A. If there is anything that comes up that is project specific, please let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. And good evening, everyone, and those of you online. Yeah, today we brought members of our technical and Valley Water team together, and both online and here in the room, to go through 5 conceptual alternatives that explore realignment of the 2 creeks and their connection to the A8 ponds as part of the overall salt pond restoration project. These alternatives are going to explore different combinations of restoration features, of breaches and channel realignment, different restoration elements to see which are the ones that provide the greatest ecosystem function, reduce flood risk, those sorts of things. And they are we were guided by 4 overall project objectives for this project. Next slide. Yeah. So the first of these is supporting ecological habitat restoration of tidal marsh, freshwater marsh, and transitional riverine habitat. The second, to ensure resilient flood protection that adapts to future sea level rise. And then the third, to reduce sediment. There's a significant amount of sediment removal that Scott will be talking about in a moment, but to reduce those maintenance needs in the future. And then the fourth being to enhance public access for this and other communities around the project area. Before presenting the 5 alternatives, I wanted to turn the mic over to Scott Dusterhoff from the SFEI Aquatic Science Center, who's going to go through some of the initial project objectives and their linkages to the overall project.
Thank you, Noah. So Mike, close. Okay. 40 people on Zoom. Okay, I want you guys all to hear me. And I have to say, I give a lot of presentations, but this is the first time in 3 years I've been in a room with so many people giving a presentation. So this is exciting and it's feeling like old times. Hope it feels like old times to you guys too. So as Noah said, I'm going to talk a bit about how this project is going to address the objectives that Noah just described. And I'm going to start out with how this project is going to meet some habitat restoration objectives. And this story really starts by looking at the entire bay. So since the gold rush, there has been a widespread loss of tidal marsh habitat all around the shoreline of San Francisco Bay. So on the left, you see in green the tidal marsh that existed in the mid-1800s, about 150,000 acres of tidal marsh at that time. And on the right, you see in green the tidal marsh that we have out there today. So something closer to 50,000 acres. So we've lost quite a bit of marsh around the region. And with that loss of marsh comes loss of critical habitat, okay? But there's also some other things at play as well. When we lose marsh, we lose the natural filtration capacity for the bay, the water filtration capacity, and we also lose the ability for natural shoreline protection during large storm events. Okay, so lots of impacts. And John mentioned this just a minute ago, but because of all this loss, there was a widespread call in the late 90s and then revisited again more recently to get to 100,000 acres of tidal marsh in the region. Okay, so get back a lot of what we lost. But getting back that much marsh is going to require a lot of sediment, a lot of mud. Okay, we need to get that sediment onto these areas that were once marshes to bring them up to the right elevation so they can be marshes once again. Okay, so that's a big part of the story here. Next slide, please. Okay, so now zooming in and focusing in on this, the South Bay shoreline and this project area, you can see from this graphic that the landscape is much different today than it was over 150 years ago. So what you see here is a map showing the habitats that existed along the South Bay shoreline in the mid-1800s. And then for reference, you can see the outline of Pond A8 and Pond A4, and then Highway 237 and 101 as well. Okay, so historically, mid-1800s, big storms would come, hit the Santa Cruz Mountains, flows would come through the creeks, through San Juan Creek at that time is what it was called, now San Tomas Aquino, Calabazas Creek, Guadalupe River, and those flows would bring a lot of sediment, and the flows would hit the Santa Clara Valley and they'd spread out. And then they'd spread out in the tidal marshes as well. And all that sediment, all that mud, all that dirt in the water would help maintain the tidal marsh habitat over time. Okay, and then as John pointed out, then we came in and then we diked off those areas for salt production. We changed the alignment of Santa Tomas Aquino and Calabasas creeks. And so now all that sediment that comes down, it goes through the Santa Clara Valley and it either gets stuck in the lower reaches of these two channels, or it goes straight past these salt ponds and goes out to the bay. Okay, so that's okay, just one sec. So then, as you've heard already, this project is going to open those levees up and get that flow and sediment into Pond A8 to help it come back to be a tidal marsh and help with the restoration of the 1,800 acres of tidal marsh that we want to bring back to this area. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's how this project is going to be supporting habitat restoration. Now moving on to how this project will affect flood protection and handle the impacts of sea level rise. So I think we all know that sea level rise presents a lot of challenges for shoreline management and for designing projects like the one we're here discussing today. And one thing that happens as sea level rises is that tidal marsh habitat, that marsh, the wetland along the shoreline, is able to move inland if it's given the room to do so. Okay, as the wetted area moves inland, marsh can move as well, but it needs that ability. So it's important to point out here that one of the key components of this project is to build what we call sloping levees or ecotone levees to protect the inland infrastructure, but also they're sloped in a way that allows that marsh to migrate inland. Okay, so that's a real important component of this project, and Noah will talk a bit about that in just a moment. Sorry, before we go to the next slide, the last thing I want to highlight here is that it's also important to point out that this project is going to maintain existing levels of flood protection. Okay, it's a key component here, is to understand that we will maintain existing levels of flood protection and will be coordinated and integrated with nearby flood protection projects. So next slide, please. And so here you see the projects that are at play. So in the yellow, you see the alignment of the shoreline phase 1 levee that's under construction, being funded by the Army Corps of Engineers to protect Alviso from future flooding. I know you all know that there is quite a history there of flooding, and more flood protection is needed. This project will also integrate with the work that Valley Water is doing along Lower Sunnyvale East and West Creeks to help improve flood management there. And then we'll also coordinate with the next level of shoreline levee that's being funded by the Army Corps of Engineers that's shown here in the dotted red line. Next slide, please. Okay, and so last objective I'll talk about here is how this project will affect sediment movement through the creeks and ultimately the creek maintenance activities of Valley Water. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, sediment comes down from the mountains, goes through the Santa Clara Valley and Santa Tomas Aquino and Calabazas creeks. And currently much of that sediment gets stuck and drops out right where the tide comes into these creeks. Okay, and so you can see here on the right, an example of Valley Water needing to go in there and take that sediment out. So currently on average, Valley Water spends about $1 million a year removing that sediment. Okay, and that's important because these channels need to be maintained so that they have enough space to move floodwaters through and protect adjacent life and property. Okay, so it's a really big thing that's done out here right now. And so we talked already about opening up the Pond A8 levee, allowing the creeks to flow into Pond A8 to bring sediment for habitat restoration. But opening that levee will also help that sediment move through these lower reaches of these creeks. Okay, so there'll be less of a need to maintain these creeks, to bring out heavy equipment, and ultimately Valley Water will be able to spend less money on maintaining these creeks for flood management purposes. And so that's a quick overview of the 3 objectives. I will pass it now back to Noah to get into the alternatives.
Thank you, Scott. Hello again. We'll go through the 4th project objective in a few minutes on recreational uses and trails. But to begin with, we're going to go through the 5 alternatives, sort of like finalists here on Oscar night or something. So the first alternative connects Calabazas and Santa Tomas Aquino Creek through to the A8 ponds, and you see the inset. I'll point here, maybe it's a little easier. You see in the inset of the upper right that the creeks are being directed through a breach from what John was calling the 237 marsh or the Harvey Marsh into the A8 ponds, and sort of reducing some of those hard right turns or hard left turns that we were talking about. And then a combination as well of tide gates in the Pond A4. Now with this, we're introducing sort of 3 restoration elements that we're going to use in different combinations, and we're going to do some hydrodynamic modeling to see how they perform in terms of simulating sediment transport and flood flows and things like that. But those are the breaches, the very breaches that we were just talking about, the tide gate structure, and then the vegetated ecotone that Scott showed us a moment ago. So let's just take a quick look at those. So pond berm breaches are simply an excavated opening in the pond berm. That might come with some pilot channels or starter channels that connect the nearby sloughs to the pond interior to allow flows to go pass back and forth. Sometimes these might need to be armored if we're worried about wind wave erosion degrading these over time, but at other times you might let them unravel, over a larger distance. We'll have to make some decisions on that as we go forward. Or we could go full hard engineering of a tide gate structure, which you see at the right-hand side. That's actually the one that was put in north of the America Center. There's a tide gate structure there, and that's what you're seeing. And that allows more control over how much tidal exchange you have, what's the tide range in the pond. So we're going to explore that use in some of these alternatives in Pond A4 to see what's a muted tidal range or narrow tidal range or a broader tidal range. And that can be worked out through modeling in processes. So the next one. This is the very same vegetated ecotone slope that Scott showed. It's a substantial vertical exaggeration. We're playing with more like a 30-to-1, like horizontal distance to 1 foot slope. So very, very shallow, like a mud flat might look. And so the idea would be, as tides come up, you get wetted areas that move substantially, inland or away. And then as sea level rise advances, those can also migrate forward, inland rather. So that I think is, the other piece, and I'll talk about it in the next slope, but there's two additional, I'll do it in the next one. We're gonna go to alternative 2. So in the second alternative, it has the same creek connections and breaches and the tide gate that we saw, as well as the Harvey Marsh ecotone. Now, I wanted to point out, you see 2 additional sort of green bands at the south end of pond A4 and at the south end of the A8 ponds. Those ecotones are actually being constructed by separate projects. So this project is evaluating their function and their performance, but they are actually being implemented separately. So the salt ponds restoration project has already imported, I can't remember the volume of sediment, but a very large amount of sediment to construct the one at the bottom of A8 South. And then there is a new project that was called the Pond A4 Resilient Habitat Project that was approved by Valley Water Board, I think in April. And so that one will be constructed along Pond A4, and they provide the same function to provide this sort of, how do we come close to what Scott was showing in terms of these historical tidal marshes? Okay, we're going to try these ecotone slopes while we give the time for sediment to start accumulating in the ponds to actually build up the pond bottoms and start to make marsh habitat again. But to the rest of alternative 2, it has most of the same features, but in this case, we're introducing a couple of other things. So we've added additional breaches along the Alviso Slough side, and that improves flood relief for a flood event coming down Guadalupe River, improves tidal exchanges in and out of Pond A8. And then I'm also highlighting nesting habitat islands, which are present in pretty much all the alternatives. I'll just show you what those look like in the next slide. So in this case, what we'll do is if there's going to be excess excavated materials for doing channel excavation or breaches, and the idea was you could build these up into topographic features around some of the old pond berm roads or other places, and the materials will be built at both subtidal, intertidal, and terrestrial elevations. So you can provide some mudflat habitat, some tidal marsh habitat, and then some features for allowing nesting of shorebirds away from predation out in the middle of these ponds. So I think that is it for restoration alternative number 2. So number 3 is going to be the same sort of creek connections again and the same ecotones again, but this time we're beginning to introduce full tidal connectivity to Pond A4. So we're going to add a breach from Pond A4 into Guadalupe Slough, as well as connecting the Sunnyvale East Channel directly into Pond A4. It doesn't have a large drainage area, so we're not concerned about backwater problems and flooding. We think it'll actually provide flood conveyance through the pond and out to Guadalupe Slough, but we're going to be evaluating that again through modeling. And I don't think I have a restoration element. I think I've run out. So let's go to alternative 4. So in this case, this is a kind of a special one that we kind of thought up sort of late in the game. And the question came up, what's the greatest amount of sediment conveyance or sediment transport we could come up with? And so we sort of are artificially creating an alternative which sort of forces that. So we have the little red X's you see are essentially channel fill. Sometimes that's known in ag terms as a ditch block, where you essentially cut off the remnant channel just with soil fill, and that will force the flow from, capturing the remnant channels or the historical channels, and it'll just be the realigned channels that are essentially forced into Pond A8 South, and that will allow us to sort of see the greatest amount of sediment transport during a rain event or flood event, that kind of thing. But otherwise, this alternative, the switch here, just to see if we can evaluate other elements of the project, is we flip the breaches from the Alviso Slough side to the Guadalupe Slough side, and we can sort of mix and match these pieces, and that's actually what is intended here. So we're not quite at here's the 5 finalists and, you know, what are we going to select? There's a few of these which we think are really viable alternatives, but we're going to be able to see the performance of these features, and we intend to actually create up to 2 additional ones and remodel them depending on how these initial 5 run through the gauntlet of our different analyses, and then we'll do some feasibility work on that. So let's go to the last alternative, and this one is sort of the maximum tidal connectivity, sort of everything everywhere all at once. We have breaches all around both the Guadalupe Slough and the Alviso Slough side. And we've introduced one like last restoration element, which is this wetland bench feature shown in purple or fuchsia. And this has a similar kind of a concept as maybe the ecotone soap. Let's show that on the next slide. So the idea here would be same idea that you have excess soils. It might be hard to get your excess soils out into the middle of the pond. It might be easier to put them adjacent to a levee, so that might go into it too in terms of the ease of building, but it doesn't offer you the predator isolation that an island would have. But the idea here would be that you would build a feature that is at intertidal elevations, and so you can allow tules and reed species to develop, which will provide habitat for ridgeway rail and other marsh dependent shorebirds. So I think that is the last of our alternatives. So with this, I'm going to introduce another member of our project team, Kelsey Regani from Kearns and West, to go through our final project objective on recreation.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. All right. So as Noah just said, the conceptual alternatives you just learned about really focus in on the first 3 project objectives, while the objective number 4 is to provide enhanced public access and improved trails. To accomplish that objective in collaboration with the local cities, Santa Clara County, and stakeholder agencies, the project team is developing preliminary trail concepts, looking at opportunities within the project area to enhance public access and improve the trails. Right now, the team is in the conceptual phase and is using the considerations you see up on the screen, among others, to start to inform the development of those concepts. So some considerations include improving public access, looking at gaps in bay trail shoreline access, protection of sensitive habitats, and considering construction and maintenance costs. It's important to note here that none of the conceptual alternatives Noah just walked through would impact existing trail plans. For an example of what a trail concept is, this is the planned Bay Trail Reach 9 concept developed by the city of San Jose and supported by Valley Water. This concept includes a proposed new trail that you see here in the pink. It kind of makes a star shape if you look at it. Kind of see the star shape. I think that the key takeaway here about trails tonight is that there's more to come on trails in the coming months, and the project team is really looking forward to your input. Speaking of more to come and next steps, Noah kind of mentioned this, but over the next 6 to 8 months, the team will be conducting modeling, refining the alternatives, maybe adding some more alternatives into the mix, and conducting feasibility analyses. Bigger picture, this is all moving towards selecting an alternative that'll then move into permitting and design in the coming years. So this kind of gives you a big picture snapshot of where things are going. For upcoming outreach, the project team plans to convene a couple meetings this fall focused on the trails and recreation use, followed by a public meeting similar to tonight on the feasible alternatives sometime in the winter 2024, early 2024. So with that, we are at the end of the presentation. I know that was a lot of information to take in. For a quick recap, but not doing it justice, but a quick recap. You heard a project overview, including some history on the project, who the project partners and team members are, and what those 4 project objectives are, and why they are the 4 project objectives. And you also heard the presentation on as of now, what the 5 conceptual alternatives are, including what those potential restoration elements are of each. And then briefly, I teed up the preliminary trail concepts and to be on the lookout for more information in the coming months. We're ready to move into question and answer. This is an opportunity to ask clarifying questions because that was a lot, if it'd be helpful to revisit anything, what was unclear about the presentation. And this is also an opportunity to share some initial input you have on the conceptual alternatives or any initial input you have that might inform the development of the preliminary trail concepts. So we're doing great on time. So we originally set aside about 30 minutes for Q&A. We have until we probably want to start cleaning up and getting out of here around 6:45, 6:50. So we have almost 40 minutes for questions, 35, 40 minutes for questions. At this point, I think how we might want to do it is have some of our teammates come up here. And then as we field questions, I can turn over. So maybe Judy, Noah, Scott, Dave, if you want to join, John, if others, you can also stay seated if you'd rather me come bring the microphone to you. And then for those, how we're going to facilitate the Q&A is that I'll take questions from those in the room first before turning over to the Zoom room. For those of you on Zoom, there's a few different ways to share your questions. You can use the raised hand function to be added to the queue. When it's your turn in line, we'll unmute your line. You can ask your question and then we'll remute you. If we have any folks who are just dialed in by phone, I'm not sure if we do, you can dial *9 and that will raise your hand in the virtual Zoom room. And lastly, please use the questions and answer box. Questions from tonight will be included in the meeting summary from tonight and posted to the project website. So in case we don't get to questions, or if you want to reference back to them, they'll be captured in the meeting summary. So with that, I'll open it up for any initial questions. Yes, and maybe Gianna will help us get you on the mic so folks on the first question Zoom can hear you. Yes.
I probably don't need a mic. My voice is loud enough. I have a couple of questions. I'll start with, when you started the initial study, did you look at ponds A22, A23, A19? Dave?
I'm on the way to the front. Yep. See. Not as part of this project's visioning. I'm sorry. Where are those ponds? They are not on, they're on the full project slide map. Yep. Yeah, they're actually right. They're in an entire other county. That's a very good point, John. They are these two are 22 and 23. So these 3 here are fully titled now and doing quite well. I'm on the way back. Sorry, there's a lot of, it's hard to do everything. Yeah, so 22 and 23 were part of our early visioning process and will be part of a future phase that we will do. In all likelihood, it will, we have not made a formal consideration of those yet, but in all likelihood, they will be kept as ponds and retained and managed for various kinds of pond dependent wildlife. Different birds use different kinds of pond habitats. And
with just one breach, each pond silted into natural habitat in a matter of like 2 years, 3 years at the most. That
is what happened at those other 3. Yes, you're right. But at those 2, I think we're going to need more managed pond habitat, and I think we're probably going to keep them there. We'll evaluate that choice when we get to it, but I should note that's part of a different project, and I don't want to steal the time that these folks have for theirs. But it is a really good question.
Okay, somewhere
sure.
On A6. That's filling in now.
That is fully titled and doing really well. There's 4 in it, but you're right. It happened really quickly.
Breaches and then 2 gated.
No, there's 4 full breaches. Yeah. Yeah.
Repeating the question. for
I'm
people
sorry. Yeah,
listening.
that's a good point. This gentleman is asking about this pond up here, A6.
You can't drive across it anymore.
No.
That's a
Yeah,
good blueprint of what we're looking for.
that exactly. That's a terrific point, Noah. So the idea and what Noah just said is that opening up these 4 ponds to tidal flows in the same way that A6 was opened would be expected to have a very, very similar outcome, although these ponds are a little deeper, so it might take a little more time. But the same general pattern should result.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Right. And thanks for kicking off the questions. I know it can be daunting to be the first one. Oh, yes. Thank you, Judy. Bring it, mic. Perfect.
Hi, I'm Theo Verhoeven. I'm interested especially in the public access.
Great.
And so I had 2 questions. One is there any going to be trail access during construction, or is there going to be some alternative routes or so, especially for the Bay Trail that goes under it and that is used for commuting as well? And then secondly, although it's not up there, for the last 20 years, I run around Pond A4.
So there's I guess there's informal trails and formal trails. So right, I understand. So the trail that goes along the existing Bay Trail access will be completely unaffected. So the commuting lanes and the bike lanes and so on, that will not be affected by the project construction. We are talking about putting breaches through pond berms. So if we use a breach concept in A4, you will not be able to make that circuit unless you can jump. But in other places, you know, the right now Fish and Wildlife are the only people who can access the outer reaches of Pond A8, but similarly, they will lose access to the end without using a boat. And yeah. Say again, you want to add? Okay. Well, there we go. That's what we're going to talk about next fall. Okay.
So more discussion is going to come in Pond A4, and my name is Adriana. I'm with the Valley Water PM. So we're going to minimize, I think, you know, not knowing the exact, you know, alternative where we're going to land. It's hard to predict, right, what the impact may be, right, during the construction, but we're going to minimize and make sure, right, the impact to the trail users and whatnot is going to be minimal. The Pond A4 that you were talking about, and one of the things that I wanted to mention, we got a lot of grants that John talked about, almost 8 million, thanks to community members like Roy with South Bay Yacht Club, Charles Taylor, Alviso Water Collaborative, and environmental group like Citizen Committee to Compete Refuge. Eileen is representing that organization. So with that kind of amazing support, the original vision that John was talking about, right, centered around the AA ponds and the Harvey Marsh, we were able to expand to A4, right? We're talking about another 300 acres of tidal marsh. We were able to realize that vision, and also bringing the Sunnyvale East, channel. So probably the sediment that we're going to be able to bring may be a little bit limited compared to the creeks that we're talking about, San Tomas and Calabazas. Nevertheless, knowing that we're going to have a sea level rise, we need to bring, right, all the sediment build the tidal marsh as quickly as possible. So with the community support, and Melody's here, also our local communities, local agency who've supported our grant effort, we've been able to do this, right, and achieve the project objective. So talking about the trail, impact to trail user during the construction. So that portion of the ecotone construction project that board just approved back in April, right? There may be some minimal impact, but we're definitely going to have the flagger. There's going to be probably construction next year. We're definitely going to have a flagger and minimize the impact, so you'll be able to continue to use. But yeah, we are very mindful of minimizing the impact and looking for enhancement opportunity. So certainly with the existing Bay Trail, we're going to look for those opportunities as well. Okay.
And if I could just add one thing, because you touched on a really important topic, and it's oh, I gotta be in frame, sorry. Yeah, okay, sorry, John Bourgeois again. I think when we're trying to accomplish these large scale multi-benefit projects, it's all about trade-offs and balancing, right? So we're going to be creating endangered species habitat. So we got to be sensitive as to how many and where we put trails, right? So that's the balance we're trying to strike as a team. And that's why we're going to come back with some other alternatives. But I think if you look at this map, you know, that pink line really is a huge connection and fills a huge gap in the Bay Trail, right? So like that's a pretty significant public access win. But we do want to balance that with the sensitive species that we're going to be attracting to this area, right? So that's just something to keep in mind, that give and take between our objectives is always kind of forefront in our mind on these large multi-objective projects. So thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll take that. Keep passing around. Thank you, Gianna.
You. Hi. Okay, I have a couple of questions. One is about the Sunnyvale East and West channels. Is it, you know, on some of these, and it was touched on, but is there the possibility that that East channel, which also takes a hard 90-degree turn, is that can be relieved for flood relief purposes so that it gets more direct access? Obviously, the channels are artificial, different, but still, is that something that's been put into the thinking caps on these projects and these alternatives?
Maybe we'll take that one first and then come back for your second question.
Yeah, so that is expressed here in alternative 3 and in 5 down here. So those in the current route, it makes another star shape. It basically goes due east, and then when it hits Guadalupe, it goes back to the northwest.
Right.
So there is a direct connection to the pond, and there's also a current flood control project going on to raise the flood walls along the edges of it. Now we're going to have to look at what does the tidal range look like in Pond A4? How does that influence flood flows and so on? But I think it's definitely a good idea in terms of just making it a straighter shot to a broader tidal connection to Guadalupe Sluice. So we're going to do it at least in 2. And then depending on how those perform in the modeling, they probably find its way into a alternative for selection.
Right. Okay, thanks. And my second was just actually it's sort of a comment on the trails and on the pink route. And as wasn't mentioned, that pink route is that trail, the curved part is part of the Don Edwards Refuge. So which is about wildlife first. So that what John was saying there, the need to think about the wildlife that the refuge is meant to benefit, and the traffic that could be on that trail. Bay Trail can be very heavily traveled by commuters, assuming people are now back in offices. But that's so it's been a concern all along. And actually, City of San Jose came up with that plan without ever consulting the refuge. So we're kind of aware and sensitive about looking at what happens there. Yeah. So that's, thank you.
Yeah, Eileen, thank you for mentioning that. This is Judy Nam again. So yeah, we are really bringing the stakeholders together. So yes, Fish and Wildlife Refuge, as well as cities and the county. And we're sitting down together, meeting periodically to talk about the trail issues. So not only we're talking about the potential environmental impact, also the O&M, right? A lot of the cities and municipalities, burdened with the O&M. So that's something that we want to take a look at, because we want it really the enduring solution, right? That we'll be able to provide for a long time to come. So definitely we are having that robust discussion amongst all the involved players.
Great, thanks, Judy. And I went back to this slide that lays out a few of those considerations. And as John said, it's a balancing act. And these are 3 of many considerations to factor in. All right, I know we have some questions on Zoom. I just want to pause before we turn to Zoom. Are there any other questions in the meeting room? And no pressure to come up right now. Yes.
Which one of these alternatives will complement the Alviso Slough scouring with the salt water continue? Which one would be the best to continue that? Would it be an obstruction? Would it be less water? So on. And there is, the way I understand it, still mercury in A8. Does this concept, does it dig it up? Does it cause any problems? But the first thing I want to know is, how does it complement the Alviso Slough? We put a lot of years and a lot of time into getting those floodgates there to get the salt water to scour, which is going to take another 20 years.
So can you hear me? Yes. They all will retain both the fluvial, the riverine flow of the Guadalupe River into Alviso Slough, which is probably one of the main determinants of scour, and as well as the tidal flow. But we're going to model those and look at what's called sediment aggradation. Like, is the sediment going to be building up if we breach all these places? And so we'll look at, does that affect flood flow conveyance? So that's kind of one of the central questions. I'm going to attempt to call a friend. Is Maya available in the panelists? Can you raise your hand? You got her? Awesome. She's our water quality expert, a colleague of mine. Hopefully we'll get her on here to speak to some of the mercury things. If not, I can go there.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hello. I'm Maya Singer from Stillwater Sciences, and thank you for asking that great question about mercury. It was actually mentioned early on in the presentation that in phase 1 of the project, there were lots of studies looking at the effects of opening up Pond A6 and the bottom end of the A8 ponds to tidal action, and how did that affect scour, how did that affect water quality, and what happened with mercury. And we did learn quite a bit in that phase 1 about the potential for a short-term pulse of mercury to kind of move around in the system, both in the water, and then there's a signal in biota that happens as well, and kind of some of the critters that live around, but it's a short-term effect. So we are anticipating in this project that we would see much of the same if there is mercury that's going to come up as a result of scour from breaching. And that's really just picking up historical mercury that has been conveyed into the ponds and been buried over time. Some of that will get picked up and moved around, but that effect will be short-lived, and will return to background levels after a matter of, months, not decades. And so that's what we're expecting. And we have built quite a bit of baseline monitoring into this project to help understand what the effects are going to be in the future. And so the baseline will just focus on the next couple of years before any construction is done. There will also be some monitoring during construction, and then there will be monitoring post-project to confirm our current understanding of what will happen as a short-term pulse.
This, all of them will continue removing the vegetation, non-native vegetation in the Alviso Slough.
I think I can. It worked? Okay. Yeah, having been through this with you for years, I think I know where you're coming at. And I think the reason you see these different breach configurations in the alternatives, and we're going to model those, I think the intent is that we would like to see the scour happening in the channel continue in advance, and the sedimentation occurring in the ponds, right? So that's what we're trying. So we'll resuspend in the channels. We'll continue to scour, just like we saw up here at A4. You saw all that scour happening at the breach, and we saw some down by the notch. By fully breaching these areas, and that's why kind of we're doing this analysis of, what if we breach just this side? What if we breach just this side? What if we did some combination? And we can even fine tune it more. We can actually talk about phasing the breaches. Do we start at the edge of the bay and then phase them back? Do these for a couple of years and do these. Just trying to maximize clearing the channel out while resuspending that sediment and getting it into the ponds. So I think the goals of this project are completely aligned with what you want to see happen. And that's our goal from an ecosystem and hydraulics standpoint as well. Yes. Yeah. We're going to try and make that situation better. Is that
Great, thank you. And thank you to our phone a friend, Maya, for hopping in. All right, I think we have some questions on Zoom and I want to make sure some folks are able to ask. One quick thing before we turn over, I did just want to welcome Victor from County Supervisor Ellenberg's office, who's on Zoom as well. Thank you for joining tonight. All right, Jose, who's first up?
Yes, so we have a few questions here. I'm going to combine two of them. One, they're asking, where can they get a copy of the slideshow? Where is the project link? And when will a recording of the meeting be available?
Great. Mike, do you want to handle two of those questions?
The recording would be posted to the website within a day or so of the meeting, and the slides will be available on the project webpage at valleywater.org. Look up the Calabazas, San Tomas Aquino Creek project. And there's a link on our
QR code.
QR code
Yes.
should be on your Zoom screen. Zap it with your phone and you'll be able to see right away.
Great. Next question. When will we know and how will we be notified of the alternatives chosen?
Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So as mentioned before, we've got quite a bit of analysis to go through, and these hydrodynamic models that I mentioned take, I thought, only a day, but it's actually months to run a simulation because they have to do time steps of a day and tidal simulations across a huge modeling grid. So we actually have Michael McWilliams at Anchor QEA. We're working on that process to run the first 5 that we talked about. And then we're going to look at the performance of those. And as we mentioned, we're going to probably mix and match a few features and maybe kick another 2 into the mix. And then we're going to analyze those. And that will be happening this fall. And our hope is that come Christmas, January, February, we'll see, we'll be at a point where we can actually have a final group of 5 that we will rank. And then we'll come back to another public meeting and you can express opinions about, this one I think is going to do better for species or different, different types of considerations like that. So we'll be present somewhere in the winter 24 to discuss the alternatives we're likely to advance into the next phase, which will be actual environmental permitting. And there'll be a whole other opportunity during that period for public comment and discussion about what elements are included, so on.
Okay, great. The next question is, will these projects be impacted by or benefit the current Mercury and PCB TMDLs?
You want to go straight to Maya for that, or?
I can. So I will say, maybe we'll go to Maya in just a second, but I will say that the TMDL processes are on their kind of their own trajectory, and that has to do with source loading and so on. And so they actually have their own actions and so on. This does introduce, as Maya mentioned, sort of temporary pulses of some of the materials, but it's not, the TMDL process runs its own sort of timeline. And then maybe that's not a satisfying answer, but I don't know if Maya wants to join in on this.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fine answer, Noah. And I would just add that as part of this project, we are coordinating with the Regional Water Quality Control Board on the mercury question and any other water quality contaminants. We've discussed the monitoring plan elements with them, and we're working with them, on permitting and various things. So they're part of this discussion. They're very well aware of the TMDLs, as are members of the project team. And so even though they're on kind of separate tracks, that conversation is happening to be sure that everybody understands the potential for change in the system related to water quality.
Yeah, and just a quick acronym decoder, TMDL, total maximum daily load. And the idea is what is the mass flow rate of, let's say, mercury or PCBs into the bay or into the environment kind of thing.
And I would say that the South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project has taken the mercury issue in this area very, very seriously over a long period of time. It was identified as so this is not something we're taking very lightly. They've done over a decade of research The whole reason that first phase on A8 was to put that notch in to start slowly introducing tidal water over time, was to understand the mercury methylation dynamics and how it's going to be entering the food web, et cetera. And so after all of this research, we have this huge USGS compilation report. If you want to read it, it's fantastic. But the bottom line is that it is better to get these things restored than, the impact, as Maya said, is very short term. You do get little spikes when you perturb the system, but long range, this is going to be a huge net benefit. So this is not something that this project or the Salt Pond project has taken lightly. It's taken it very seriously, and there's a lot of great research behind it.
Great. Any other questions in Zoom? All right. Any other questions in the meeting room? Yes, a couple. Okay. Go here first.
I don't have a question. I wanted to bring it up because I think it maybe isn't recognized by the public. And it has to do with the finances that are behind this project. And it is, and I stand ready to be corrected, however, but it's my understanding. I mean, this is a project that goes forward with grants and getting money from outside. It's not using parcel tax money. It's not using money from capital improvement for Valley Water. I don't know, but it seems like this is a forward-looking future type project. It's not one that's like anything else that Valley Water has done, to my knowledge. So I'm grateful that the technical capabilities of Valley Water are going toward doing this, because it's definitely complicated and definitely necessary. So, but I just wanted to bring that up because this, I think, is handled differently financially, but I'll let people who know better than I do comment.
Thanks for bringing that up, Eileen. Of course, so this project, majority of the funding is coming from the grant, right? I mean, Valley Water is paying for some, but I think I would say over 80% and being funded by the grant funding. And as you all know, through the design, we think we have adequate funding. Of course, what we're kind of, spinning out in this, planning effort, maybe, the design and permitting might be more complicated. And, but from where I'm sitting right now, we think we have adequate funding through design. Now, this project does not have any secured construction funding. So this is why this project is so important to have that partnership, right? And engagement and community support. So we could keep winning these grants. So we could actually do the implementation. It's great to have these ideas, but if we can't put it on the ground, then it's not going to benefit anyone, right? So this is why, thank you for mentioning that we need to really keep working on that grant funding and being able to demonstrate, right, our partnership and the community support, environmental community support from the local, regional. So I can't emphasize that aspect of this project, more.
And then I think there was a question over here.
Two small questions. First, I just want to give my support to all Valley Water. I think you do a great job. But I went online and I saw that there are long-term plans also for the left of Calabazas Creek, or maybe that is long term. There was something online there. Okay, and then so looks like it's very long term. Yeah, and then related to that, the concrete levee there at Calabazas Creek. I know they're also planning something like that as one of the alternative on the Guadalupe Creek, the last portion of it. And is there anything that can be done on all the graffiti there? Specifically because one of the alternatives on the Guadalupe Creek was also to raise concrete levees there.
Yeah. I just want to bring that message though, right? With the doing all these great projects like Ecotone and whatnot, and doing the nature-based design, right? We like to do that as much as possible, but in order to protect, right, the coastal community, sometimes those levees and flood walls are necessary component so that we could actually do these tidal restoration, right? So in combination, when we're talking about resilient flood protection, right? Project objective, we are coordinating with other flood, protection project like Shoreline, which may employ, levees, Sunnyvale East and West Channel project, which may employ flood wall. But rest assured, we are also combining with this project. So this project's, habitat restoration goal could be achieved without impacting the community, and we could actually enhance the flood risk, benefit, so reduction benefit. So you're talking about the O&M aspect, right? Of course, once you have the, walls, flood walls and whatnot, it's really, gravitating this graffiti tagging kind of activity. We're trying our best to deploy our O&M, folks, obviously, as quickly as possible so that we could minimize those impact. And there's a Valley Water, I think the website where you could put in the request if you want our O&M, staff pay attention to that particular area. So we are doing our best to minimize any adverse impact to the neighborhood.
Great, thank you. I think there's one more comment from the Zoom room.
That's right. All right, here we go. All right, so we have a comment and then we have a question. The comment is from Susan Glending. Ideally, the upfront investments will pay off for decades to come by helping alleviate sediment maintenance in the Calabazas and STA creeks, and help create shoreline resilience against sea level rise effects. And then we have a question. Is there a financial assessment being done for the construction phase of the project as part of the alternative analysis?
You want to talk?
No pressure.
So the answer is yes. So part of our feasibility analysis will include construction cost estimates. We have our design engineer, Chuck Anderson from Schaff and Wheeler in the room here. But initially you sort of do quantity takeoffs and sort of what are the costs of, bridges are expensive. Those sort of tie gates are expensive, whereas excavating channel or even just large amounts of earthwork is expensive. In many ways, I think if people could wave a wand, they would just say, let's just get rid of all these pond berms and let it go back to nature. Well, that is hugely expensive to move all that soil material. So we will have to consider the ecosystem benefits, the costs, the environmental risks. All of these things have to come into play. But we will definitely be a cost estimate will be part of it.
Great. Thank you for the question. And thank you, Susan. Hi, Susan, for your comment. Doing a quick time check. Are there any final questions, initial input at this point?
Thank you for the presentation.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you to all the presenters and for all of you for being here tonight, both in the room and in the Zoom room. Just a quick recap on immediate next steps or near-term next steps. Expect to see the meeting summary and recording and presentation from today up on the project website in the coming weeks, and then be on the lookout for more details about outreach meetings about trails in the fall. I think I heard some folks who it would be really great to have your input in that discussion. So with that, I'd like to invite Director Santos if you would like to share any closing remarks.
Well, first of all, I'll give you the Water District blessing. But thank you for all taking your busy time to come and share with us today. We want to keep our environment beautiful and healthy and continue all the great fishing and all the habitat, and I can go on and endangered species. Alviso is a beautiful place, and people don't know until they get here. It's warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. That's right here. Thank you all. Appreciate it.